Hey, what's up everyone? Jay's 2 cents here, and I'm gonna take you guys along for a ride on some very important and free software that I think every single computer should have on it. I don't care if you're a beginner builder, a moderate, intermediate, or an advanced PC user. Every single system should have at least some of this software on there. It's gonna make your life so much easier in the future if you ever have to troubleshoot or test anything. So don't go anywhere. I think this could definitely help everyone.
We interrupt this video to bring you a special message from iFixit. No, we interrupt this interruption with this interruption about new stuff from iFixit. Wish you had a new graphics card, but inventory sucks? Fix the inventory problems with iFixit. Whoa, don't drop it. Can't fix that with iFixit. Just kidding, yes you can. Wish you could take iFixit with you anywhere, but your pockets aren't big enough? Introducing the new More
and the new Minnow.
Take them with you anywhere. So get iFixit for your loved ones, or just get them for yourself.
There's no real particular categories or anything to this, and a lot of this stuff we've actually talked about in individual videos, and we've done this kind of concept in the past, but as time goes on and software changes and improves, or sometimes gets worse, we like to kind of change up our recommendations. So first and foremost, I feel like every single system should have some sort of monitoring software. So that's why for this, I use CPU ID HWMonitor. Now, HWMonitor basically just scans every single sensor in your system. And what it will do is give you a live readout of what all of those sensors are. So most of this information that's in here is going to be probably irrelevant to most people. For instance, did you know your CPU reports temperature, but did you know your motherboard also reports a temperature for the CPU? And then there's a socket temp, and then there's a package temp, and then there's die temps, and there's all sorts of temps. You can kind of see everything that's going on. And if you just kind of go by what's on the motherboard, sometimes you don't know exactly which readout that's gonna be. So in this particular laptop, as you can see, I can see what my package temperature is right here for my CPU. It's currently 55, 59, 57. I can see what my E-cores and P-core temperatures currently are. I can see the minimum they've ever been, the maximum they've ever been. I can see the amount of wattage being drawn. Wattage is kind of a big deal too, because if you were to put your system under a stress test and you can see how much watts that your system is actually generating while under load, it can kind of give you a good idea of how big to size your cooler. Maybe you can give you some ideas to determine whether or not your cooler might be too small. But it's not just CPU that we can see. So we can see all of our frequencies, obviously. We can see all of our voltages. This right here is specifically, I believe, for our RAM. So we can see our RAM, no, actually, is that this right here? Yeah, okay. So we can actually see what our SSD temperatures are. We can see what our RAM temperatures are. We can see VRM temperatures. We can even see like hotspot and edge temp when it comes to our graphics cards, which is something that oftentimes, like NVIDIA doesn't report its hotspot temperature. If you look up at like MSI Afterburner or something, it just reports like the edge temp, which is like the better looking temperature. But there's a range of temperature across the die, and each core kind of has its own temperature diode and stuff. So you can get a good idea of what those temperatures look like by actually coming down here to, let's say, GPU right here. So we can see we got our GPU utilization, we got our performance temperature limit. So it even shows us what our limits and stuff are gonna be. But it's a 100% free piece of software. Anytime a new CPU or GPU comes out, they always update it. I think it's extremely important. Now, I talked about doing stress testing a second ago and checking out coolers and cooler temps and stuff like that, which means you obviously need a way to stress test your system. Now there's two particular stress tests I recommend here. And I would always have a monitoring piece of software like HWMonitor or something like that going while you're running stress test. So Cinebench is one that is kind of nice. However, Cinebench really only kind of tests an AVX extraction set. Basically, it just says, hey, we can render a scene. You'll be able to see that all it's doing right now is it's basically doing ray tracing. It's just doing math to say where the light is bouncing and what the image is to create. So if we bring up HWMonitor too, you can see now what's actually happening with the CPU. So we're at package temp of 70C. It's actually not too bad at all on this Core i9-12900H. Cores are sitting in the high 60s, low 70s. E-cores are in the mid 60s. Our frequency is all the way down to 2.5 gigahertz though. That's because of the fact that it's a huge load for a laptop. It's only drawing 49 watts of power on the CPU. So that now you can see how the HWMonitor software really comes in handy when doing stress testing. But this only stress tests one aspect of your system. I'm gonna go ahead and stop this test right now. And that's the CPU. It doesn't hit the RAM at all, doesn't hit the GPU at all. So I also like to use OCCT as an alternative to the CPU test if you wanna get a more kind of a robust system-wide test going on. In fact, when we even did our factory tour recently of iBuyPower, we showed how OCCT is what they use for an 1 hour and 5 minute test. But again, completely free piece of software that you can download from the internet. You can see here we can test all sorts of different things. We can test our memory, we can test 3D standard, 3D adaptive, we can test our VRAM, our power. You can even set up a custom stability test, which will go in and kind of check everything. It just sort of runs different size instructions, different types of instructions, different workloads, long math, short math, all sorts of stuff, even SSD tests to kind of get a good idea of everything in your system is running correctly. And all of that can happen right here on the left. Now it does have its own monitoring built in, as you can see right here, and it's very, very similar to what we can see in HWMonitor, pretty much because it's giving all of the same exact temperature and sensor readouts that you would find in your system. It's kind of redundant to have OCCT's monitor and HWMonitor going at the same time. So if you're using OCCT, I would just use the built-in monitoring, only because anytime the software is pinging the CPU or any of those sensors saying like, hey, what's happening? And then the sensor has to like report back what's going on, that actually takes a little bit of processing power away from whatever test that you're running. So if you're doing benchmarking and you're going for like high scores or whatever, you wouldn't want multiple pieces of monitoring software happening at the same time. You just want to use whatever's built in because it will prioritize the fact that the test is more important than the monitoring built in, whereas HWMonitor is a separate application which is going to demand some priority when it comes to polling those particular sensors. So just wanted to kind of point that out there. Plus this gives you a little graph over time that you can also record and you can spit out into a graph and see later, like if you want to run it for an hour, you can see how it did over that whole hour. It's a very nice piece of software to have. It's something that has grown quite a bit over time. In fact, when you do your stability test, one of the things I like about it is the fact that it gives you it's gonna start right now, but you're gonna see a little animation icon. And the cool thing about the animation icon is they call it a freeze test because of the fact that it's going to be able to give you a visual indicator on whether or not something in the system has hung. So you see this little kind of a snake going over here? It's just going round and round and round, telling you that the system is doing something. If that were to stop, and it's not moving anymore, it means your system froze, it hung. Maybe your overclock isn't stable, your RAM isn't stable or something like that. And then it will show you any errors that it found along the way, depending on what kind of test it's running and how long you've told it to run. So it really is good also if you're getting random blue screens and stuff and you can't really figure out what's going on necessarily, maybe with event logging and stuff in Windows, it can give you a place to start to try and figure out where some of the instabilities in your system are. Now when we talk about cooling, it's nice to have a way to control your fans. And I've done a video about this software in the past. I absolutely love this software. I made a pretty big donation to this guy too, because he didn't know we were doing this video, but this is FanControl. FanControl has no sensors. That would make sense probably because I'm on a laptop. Yes, yes, yes. We did a video about how to use this. This will allow you to go in there and find every single fan header built into the system and every single temperature sensor built into the system and allow you to be able to assign curves to your particular fans based on what load you're having it monitor. You can even have it monitor multiple sensors at the same time. So the problem is you go into your BIOS and you tell your cooler like, hey, monitor the CPU temp. Let CPU temp be what triggers our fans and stuff. Well, if you got a gaming system, more often than not, the biggest source of heat in your system is gonna be your GPU. Now your GPU is not something that the motherboard is tracking or monitoring. It's only monitoring onboard sensors for the motherboard. In fact, when it says monitor the CPU temp, more often than not, it's not even monitoring the actual die temp on the CPU itself, it's monitoring its own temperature sensor built into the socket of the motherboard to figure out what the CPU temp is. So now I'm not going to go through a tutorial on how to use this, but I just wanted you to see what the software looks like. This is where you go in and you identify your fans and stuff. You can tell it to start up with the system. You can even give it a delay to start, like let's say you can tell it to start 30 seconds after the rest of the system boots. That way everything is started up and then this starts minimized. It's actually a really smart piece of software. But what you can do is you can set multiple sensors for one header. So you can tell it prioritize whichever is hottest, CPU or GPU. That way, if your CPU goes under load because you're doing rendering or you're streaming or you're editing video or whatever, and you tell it to encode, suddenly the CPU is doing stuff. Let's say you're not GPU encoding for whatever reason. Your CPU temp goes up, the fans will ramp up with that CPU curve. But you can do a mix curve, which also says if the GPU is warmer, use the GPU as a priority. So it's kind of nice that you don't have to set one header to be one or the other, which is what your BIOS, and even most of the software built into motherboards these days for the OS, is going to prioritize one or the other. So I love the fact that FanControl is nothing more than a user interface, or a GUI, a graphics user interface, that allows the user to go in and visually set curves and stuff for their fans. It's an extremely strong piece of software. You can set up schedules. You can even set up different types of fan curves for different times of the year if you want. You could even say, okay, I want to use my summer fan curve, which is now going to suddenly, and you can just toggle them on and off as you want. You have a summer fan curve where things are maybe more aggressive because it gets hotter in your room. You could have a winter fan curve where maybe you live in a very cold climate. You open the window and suddenly it's very, very cold in your room and you don't need your fans blaring. So you could slow them down and have your system be much more silent. And again, it's 100% free. Nothing about this software is behind any sort of a paywall. Everything is donation based. So I think FanControl is a very, very important piece of software that every system should have, whether it's even a laptop, desktop, or not. So we've talked about monitoring our temperatures and stuff. We've talked about how to stability test and stress test our system, which I think is very important for every system. We've now talked about how to control our fans and stuff if you determine during stress testing that your coolers or your fans are not properly speeding up as they should. So there's fine tuning you can do to get your temperatures going. What about your GPU? Well, the GPU is where I've got two pieces of software here that I would recommend. One, MSI Afterburner. I think most people know what MSI Afterburner is. Basically, it does exactly like what I just showed, like HWMonitor can do for your monitoring all your sensors and stuff on your motherboard or your whole system. But MSI Afterburner allows you to take control over parameters in your VBIOS on your graphics card that are unlocked or available to you. You'll notice my core voltage is grayed out, my power limit's grayed out, my temp limit is grayed out. That's pretty much because of the fact that I am on a laptop. But if we were using a desktop, we would have core voltage slider, which is not gonna increase our voltage, it's just gonna slide our voltage ratio with clock limit up or down to basically for stability reasons. If you start pushing your core frequency to try and overclock, you might need more voltage sooner in that frequency, so you can slide it, basically moving it up slides it down, if that makes any sense. But core clock here, this is where you can come in and do your overclocking. You can overclock your memory. You can control your fans right here. Because I'm on a laptop here, I can't actually go in here and change the fan speeds. I would have to use the laptop software to do that, unless I was doing something like FanControl. But it allows you to go in there and customize your GPU in terms of fan speeds, overclocking on things that are available to you, which is going to be specifically your GPU core and your RAM. If you're not interested in doing that, but you want to know more about what's happening with your GPU, and you don't necessarily want to install a piece of software like CPU ID HWMonitor, which shows you everything, you could use Tech PowerUp GPU-Z. This is also going to scan all of the sensors in your GPU, and I like how it's showing the Intel Iris because currently that's the GPU that's activated. If you hit the lookup button, it even tells you like exactly what that is. So if you were like, what is my graphics card? And you click lookup, it takes you to their own database to show you like, here's what those particular graphics card settings are, or what that graphics card is. But because I'm a laptop, I have multiple graphics cards in here. So I can go in here and select now my 3080 Ti laptop. Now we can see the fact that this is a RTX 3080 Ti laptop. Click lookup, there's more information about it. I can see how many cores I've got, what's the boost, what's the bit rate for the memory, all that information. It's very, very cool. But back to what I was saying about limits. If I was to come over here and go to sensors, and I was to expand this, we can see right now, perf cap or performance cap, and even if you hover over it, explains why. Right now it says we're technically thermal limited, but that seems a little arbitrary considering the fact that we're not really doing anything. It's currently sitting at 57.3 C. It'll actually go up to like 85 or 90 C. But if I were to put this under load by using something like Heaven or some synthetic benchmark or even gaming, it'll more than likely go to voltage limit and probably go back and forth between voltage limit and power limit as being our reasons for being limited. But you can see now our load is basically, think of it as like a dashboard for your graphics card, just your graphics card, to tell you everything that's happening there. So if you want to actually create a file though, to go back and reference later, you could click log to file. It'll tell you where to save it. You save the location, I'll just do documents. And now it's actually making a file. And if you want, you can even screenshot what this particular graph looks like. And then you can save the file or even upload to free image hosting, whatever, just save to file. And then It creates a graphics interface file, or a GIF. I'm going with GIF. You can go and start that argument. It's not graphics, it's graphics. Okay, just saying. But let's say you're getting stuttering or something in your games, you can't figure out why, and you just want to know what's happening. You could be logging, and then you can notice like where those stutters are by looking at the chart. You might notice some sort of a dip in the frequency. You might have noticed that the engine load went down suddenly, and that could be an indicator of CPU bottlenecking or other issues happening with your system. So you can kind of figure out what is going on by just simply logging it. And GPU-Z is another important free piece of software. Now let's talk about the other side of things. We did a video on this recently, and they did exactly what I said they would do, is they took down the free downloader, but it's back. So I'm gonna go ahead and mention this again, and that is Revo Uninstaller, which is an extremely powerful piece of software. It allows you to go in and delete anything you want from your system. Yes, anything, so be careful, but it allows you to remove things even from Windows that maybe you don't want in there. Like, if there's any of the built-in software that you just don't want, you can get rid of it. More importantly, you can get rid of things that are just also bloatware on laptops or desktops. Maybe you've had software just accumulating for years on your system, and your system is acting funky, and you've got registry files that are just scattered all over the place. You can use this to get rid of that stuff. So I'll just do a quick demo here. So I would right-click on OBS and click Uninstall. We can uncheck Make System Restore Point. Now that's nice that that's there. Means you can make an image of what your system looked like before that file gets deleted. That way, if you screw something up, you can at least take that image and restore from it and be back to where you were beforehand. I always unclick it because I like to live dangerously. So we're gonna hit Continue. What it's gonna actually do is bring up the OBS Uninstaller. It's not gonna go in and delete files yet. It's gonna bring up the OBS Uninstaller. We can say we want to delete our settings and scenes and everything and click Uninstall. Now on the surface, it seems like, cool, OBS uninstalled itself. It got rid of everything, nice. No, it didn't. Now we can hit Advanced on our performing the initial analysis and uninstall, hit Scan. So look at all of these files that it left behind. Like these are registry files right here. You see H key, current user, software, Microsoft Windows, current version. So that's all in the registry. And the registry, as that gets fuller and fuller and more full of junk, that slows down your OS. It really does. And then there's other files that are left behind just wherever, like right here, system program files, OBS Studio, bin64, obs.exe. Like it left its executable behind somewhere. So anyway, we can hit select all and then delete. Are you sure you want to delete the selected system or files? Yes. Oh look, it even left some more behind. So now we're gonna select all again, delete again, yes. Now every single trace of OBS is gone. We've even done this for getting rid of drivers. We've done this for getting rid of bloatware mostly, but we can also use it to get rid of apps that we don't want that are installed with Windows. So that's a very nice piece of software to have. I was disappointed to see that they had gotten rid of the free download. I think it's because so many people downloaded it at one time after my video that we were probably hitting their download server way too hard. So that was why they removed it temporarily. But when they removed it, they also did a 50% off their paid version, which has extra features available to it, which a lot of people actually ended up buying it, I guess. I've never talked to this company. I don't know. I don't even have the paid one myself. But apparently a lot of people came back and said it's the best piece of software they've ever had. Even the free version or the half off version was more than worth it. So I don't know if they'll do that again, but we'll see. But I think it's a very important piece of software to have. In fact, there's so many other things it does I'm not even aware of. Like I don't even know what Hunter mode is. Anyway, one last piece of software that I think is an honorable mention is going to be OpenRGB. I can't really demonstrate it on this particular laptop because I don't have much RGB on this laptop other than the keyboard. Yeah, see it's saying interfaces failed to initialize, mostly because of the fact that this does not have much going on with it RGB wise. It's not a standard like motherboard. It doesn't have any controllers built in for like IQ or anything like that. But OpenRGB is a free piece of RGB software that's constantly being updated and works with many of the main controllers that are out there. I think from like Razer and NZXT, Corsair, ROG. So that instead of having to have, like let's say you have Corsair RAM and you've got an ROG motherboard. Well, technically they're supposed to SDK work together. Most of the time they don't. So that means you would have like IQ for controlling the memory RGB, and then you would have the Armor Crate for controlling the ROG stuff. And then you've got an MSI graphics card. So then you've got to have like Mystic Light or whatever to control the graphics card. And then you've got in there some of the, like, let's say you got, I don't know, RGB fans from Be Quiet. So those are plugged into the motherboard, but then you're having a hard time making everything sync. You can actually use OpenRGB to create profiles to run all of your RGB from one piece of software. This is something we've been asking for a long, long time, and like the industry. It's nice to see that OpenRGB is a publicly funded, like by donations and stuff from Patreon and all this other sources that they get community funding to continue the project going, because I'll tell you right now, super simple, super free. And to be honest, does it, in my opinion, kind of better than like a lot of those companies do. It can, and it's always getting updated with different modes and stuff. So Phil uses it, and this is one of the reasons why it's on here. I think it's an honorable mention if you're just frustrated and tired. What really led to Phil wanting this or doing this is because of how many times Armory Crate has bricked itself on his system, and sometimes the only way to actually get that back is to like reinstall Windows. You got tired of going through all that. So
that's how I found out about Revo Uninstaller, because I was trying to fix Armory Crate.
And we also fixed our infinite spinning wheel of death of thinking wheel on my mouse that we still don't know exactly. Actually, it was Asus causing that. It was Asus. So anyway, there we go, guys. Just a video to show you kind of like what I think is must-have software at every single system, regardless of how new or old the system is. The older the system, the more important I think Revo Uninstaller is going to be. I normally would do a video about each of these independently, but I wanted to kind of give one hub, one stop for people to go to find really important pieces of software to have on their system after they've built their tower or a tower that's been around for a long time. All of these are useful for everybody. So there you go, guys. What is your go-to piece of software? Like, what is your most important, like every system I build must have it? Comment down below. Oh, and also too, I think something else you should really install is a subscription to our channel on your YouTube sub feed. That would actually be a very, very nice one to have on there. Not free though, because you have to actually look at this. That costs you. That costs you probably anxiety, maybe a little bit of inconvenience to your optic nerve, and then your hearing canal, your ear canal has to listen to this. So there's that.